The cell phone vibrated for the third time on the mahogany desk in the executive office located on the 40th floor of Madison Medical Center in Manhattan. Dr. Charlotte Bennett took a deep breath before answering, recognizing the emergency department number. "Dr. Bennett speaking," she replied, maintaining her characteristic professional tone as she observed the city through the windows of the tall building. "Doctor, we have an emergency. Catherine Harrison, age 78, has suffered a severe ischemic stroke. The family has specifically requested your services." The name Harrison made Charlotte sit up straighter in her seat. The Harrison family was one of the most influential in New York, owning a business empire that spanned 3 generations. "I'll be there in 5 minutes," he replied, already gathering his belongings. Upon entering the emergency room, Charlotte was immediately greeted by Alexander Harrison, CEO of Harrison Enterprises and the patient's grandson. She froze momentarily at the sight of him. His blue-gray eyes still had the same devastating effect they had that night in Chicago, during the neurology conference, 6 months ago. "Dr. Bennett," he greeted her formally, as if they had never shared those intense hours at the Four Seasons Hotel, as if he didn't know she was carrying his child. Charlotte discreetly adjusted her lab coat, mentally thanking the wide cut that disguised her 24-week pregnancy. "Mr. Harrison, update me on your grandmother's condition." While he reported the symptoms, Charlotte maintained her professional focus, ignoring the memories of that night that kept surfacing. The smell of his expensive cologne, mixed with the antiseptic environment of the hospital, sent her senses into turmoil. In the emergency room, Catherine Harrison was conscious, but had difficulty speaking and paralysis on her right side. Charlotte immediately began the treatment protocol, coordinating her team with the efficiency that had made her one of New York's most respected neurologists at age 32. "We will need to keep her under observation for at least 72 hours, Charlotte informed the family after stabilizing the patient. "The next period is crucial." Alexander nodded, his piercing eyes studying her with intensity. "Will you be the doctor in charge of the case?" "Yes," he replied, maintaining professionalism. "I will make regular visits and personally supervise the treatment." The next few hours were a test of his physical and emotional endurance. Between exams, monitoring, and consultations with specialists, Charlotte had to deal with the constant presence of Alexander, who refused to leave the hospital. During a break to review the test results, she felt a familiar movement in her belly. Unconsciously, his hand rested on his belly, a gesture that did not go unnoticed by Alexander, who had just entered the room. The silence that followed was deafening. "How long?" he asked, his controlled voice masking a storm of emotions. Charlotte considered lying, denying it, but she knew it was useless. 24 weeks. Alexander closed his eyes for a moment, doing mental calculations. When he opened them again, there was an iron determination in his gaze. "Why didn't you tell me?" "It was one night, Alexander. One night without commitments or promises," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "I've made my decision. A decision that affects not only you but also me and my son," he replied, his voice low and controlled, but full of intensity. "Your business empire, your traditional family. It didn't need this complication," Charlotte argued, remembering the headlines about the Harrisons and their rigorous expectations about lineage and marriage. "It's not up to you to decide what I need or don't need." Alexander took a step towards you, his presence dominating the small office space. "That night in Chicago wasn't just one night for me." Catherine's heart monitor began beeping alerts before Charlotte could respond. She rushed to the patient's room, grateful for the interruption, even though she was worried about her patient. For the next few hours, Charlotte focused entirely on steadying Catherine, ignoring Alexander's intense gazes and the questions she knew were coming. But as he worked, he was aware that his life was about to change drastically. At the end of her shift, physically and emotionally exhausted, Charlotte found Alexander waiting for her in the hospital parking lot. "This isn't over, Charlotte," he said, his voice determined. "We have a lot to talk about." "Tomorrow," she replied, feeling the weight of the day on her shoulders. "Now I need to rest. For the baby." Something softened in Alexander's gaze at the mention of the baby. "Let me take you home." "I have my car," she gently declined. "Then give me your address. We need to talk, and you know it." Charlotte hesitated before taking out a business card and writing down her address on the back. As he drove home, he thought about how his orderly, independent life was about to be completely transformed. The baby moved again, as if in agreement. In her Upper East Side apartment, Charlotte watched the city illuminated through her window. "I knew that tomorrow I would face not only Alexander but also all the complications that would come with the revelation of her pregnancy. The Harrison family was known for its control and strict traditions. How would you react to a baby out of wedlock? How would your career be affected?" But as she stroked her belly, Charlotte knew she would weather whatever storm came her way. He had built his career with determination and competence, and he would raise his son with the same love and strength. Alexander Harrison might be one of the most powerful men in New York, but she also had her own resources and her own strength. Tomorrow would bring its challenges, but for now she allowed herself to just feel her baby's gentle movements, finding comfort in the unique bond they shared. The rest she would face when the sun rose. Breakfast sat untouched on the kitchen table as Charlotte tried to control her anxiety. In a few hours, she would have to face not only a long day at the hospital caring for Catherine Harrison, but also the inevitable conversation with Alexander. Her reflection in the living room mirror revealed dark circles under her eyes that not even her makeup could completely disguise. The intercom rang at precisely 7:30, making your heart skip a beat. On the screen, Alexander's imposing figure waited in the lobby, wearing an impeccable Italian suit that certainly cost more than his monthly rent. "Good morning," he said when she opened the door, his eyes immediately traveling over her figure, lingering on her belly, now more evident in the tight dress beneath her open lab coat. "Come in," Charlotte replied, trying to maintain the professional composure that had always characterized her. "We have 30 minutes before I need to be at the hospital." Alexander crossed the room with the same commanding presence that commanded meeting rooms. "We need a lot more than 30 minutes to discuss this." He gestured toward his belly. "It has a name," Charlotte replied, unconsciously protective. "And regardless of what we're going to discuss, my patients are expecting me at 8:30. "Charlotte." Alexander ran a hand through his perfectly straightened hair, a rare sign of disturbance. "You carry my son. How could you hide this from me for 6 months?" "It wasn't an easy decision," she admitted, sitting down on the couch. "But after that night in Chicago, we each went back to our lives. You have an empire to run, a reputation to maintain, and you unilaterally decided that I had no right to know about my own son?" Her voice was controlled, but Charlotte could feel the tension building. "I have a solid career, Alexander. I can provide everything this baby needs." "It's not just about financial provision." He walked over, sitting down next to you. "This baby is a Harrison. My family has a right to know him, to be a part of his life." Charlotte felt a chill at the thought of the powerful Harrison family. "Your family that demands arranged marriages and has a 19th century code of conduct?" "My family values tradition and loyalty," he corrected, "and that you will love this baby unconditionally." The silence that followed was interrupted by the ringing of Charlotte's cell phone. It was the hospital. "Catherine is stable," she reported after hanging up. "But I need to make my rounds." "I'm going with you," Alexander declared, standing up. "We can continue our conversation later." During the journey to the hospital, Charlotte felt the weight of Alexander's gaze every time the baby moved, and she instinctively touched her belly. It felt strange sharing these intimate moments with someone after months of keeping the secret. At the hospital, the familiar routine helped Charlotte regain her balance. Catherine was responding well to treatment, her strength surprising even the medical team. "She's always been a fighter," Alexander commented, watching his grandmother sleep. "I built the Harrison empire alongside my grandfather when no one believed in a woman in business." Charlotte noticed a tone of admiration in his voice that she had never noticed before. "She's extraordinary," he agreed, checking her vitals. "His recovery is progressing better than expected." Like our baby, Alexander said softly, taking advantage of the fact that they were alone in the room. I want to be part of everything, Charlotte. The exams, the consultations, the decisions. Alexander, she sighed, feeling emotionally exhausted. It's not that simple. It's actually simpler than you think. He stepped closer, his intense eyes fixed on hers. I want you and our son in my life, permanently. I don't need a marriage proposal out of obligation. Charlotte retreated defensively. No obligation. Alexander held her arm gently. That night in Chicago, do you think it was a coincidence that I was at that neurology conference? Charlotte frowned, confused. What are you talking about? I already knew her by reputation, the brilliant Dr. Bennett, who revolutionized the treatment of brain trauma. I attended that conference specifically to meet her. The revelation took her by surprise. Why? Because every person who spoke about you demonstrated not only professional respect, but a genuine admiration for your humanity. And when we finally met, a soft moan from Catherine interrupted the conversation. Charlotte immediately turned her attention to the patient, but her mind was in turmoil with Alexander's revelations. We'll continue later, he promised, lightly touching your hand before walking away. The rest of the day passed in a blur of appointments and procedures, but Charlotte couldn't stop thinking about the interrupted conversation. Had Alexander planned to meet her? What else did she not know about that night that changed her life? At the end of her shift, she found Alexander waiting in the parking lot again, but this time she didn't resist when he offered her a ride. Dine with me, he urged, not like the authoritarian CEO who ran an empire, but like the man who had shared his vulnerabilities that night in Chicago. Charlotte knew this was a defining moment. Her carefully planned life was about to change drastically, but for the first time since discovering she was pregnant, she allowed herself to consider that maybe, just maybe, this change could be for the better. Okay, she agreed, feeling the baby move as if approving her decision. But I need to change my clothes first. Alexander's smile lit up his face in a way she had only seen once before, that night in Chicago, when all titles and expectations had vanished, leaving just a man and a woman discovering something unexpected in each other. The Le Bernardin restaurant was practically empty when Charlotte and Alexander arrived. He had made a point of reserving a private area, away from the prying eyes that would certainly recognize the CEO of Harrison Enterprises. Charlotte adjusted the black dress she had hastily picked out at home, grateful that it still fit into some of her dressier outfits. The maitre d' led them to a discreet table, partially hidden by a decorative screen. You look stunning, Alexander commented as he pulled out the chair for her. His appreciative look made Charlotte blush slightly, reminding her of the intensity of their mutual attraction in Chicago. Alexander, she began, after the sommelier had left with the order of mineral water for her and a scotch for himself. We need to set some clear boundaries. I agree, he replied, surprising her. For example, the limit of your stubbornness in trying to keep our son away from me. Charlotte took a deep breath, controlling her growing irritation. It's not stubbornness, it's protection. Do you have any idea what it means to be a single mother in the medical world, especially in neurology? And do you have any idea what it means to find out you're going to be a father through an accident? He replied, leaning forward. That you lost 6 months of my son's development because you decided you knew what was best for everyone? The waiter arrived with the drinks, momentarily interrupting the growing tension. Charlotte took the moment to reorganize her thoughts. Your family, she finally said, has very specific expectations about marriage and inheritance. How do you think they would react to a baby out of wedlock? My grandmother built an empire when women could barely have bank accounts, Alexander replied, his tone softening. She understands about breaking convention when necessary. Catherine is different, Charlotte admitted, remembering the strength she saw in the matriarch's eyes even during her recovery. Yes, she is. And she'll love you. Alexander smiled, reaching across the table to touch her hand. Especially when I know you're carrying your first great-grandchild. His touch sent familiar shivers down Charlotte's arm. "It's not that simple." "Actually, it's simpler than it seems," he interrupted gently. "In Chicago, when we met, you showed me a woman who was not afraid to challenge convention, who stood up for her convictions even when everyone disagreed with her experimental treatment method." "That was different," she protested weakly, remembering the heated presentation she had given about her new treatment protocol for brain trauma. "No, it wasn't." Alexander lightly squeezed his hand. "It was you being exactly who you are. Brilliant, determined, and incredibly passionate." The waiter returned to take their order, giving Charlotte a few moments to process Alexander's words. When they were alone again, she felt the baby move vigorously. "He's agitated," she commented, unconsciously reaching for her stomach. Alexander watched the gesture with fascination. "Him? Do you already know the sex?" Charlotte nodded. "I found out last week. I was going to do a detailed morphological exam next." "I want to be there," he declared firmly. "In all exams, appointments, preparations. Charlotte, please don't exclude me anymore." There was a vulnerability in his request that she had never associated with the powerful Alexander Harrison. It was the same tone he had used that night in Chicago, when he confided his fears about following in his father's footsteps as head of the companies. "Okay," she agreed softly. "But we need to set clear boundaries. My career is important to me." "And it will continue to be," he assured. "I don't want to change who you are, Charlotte. I want to build something together with you." Dinner continued with a lighter conversation, recalling moments from the conference in Chicago and discussing plans for the future. Charlotte was surprised by the ease with which they were able to switch between professional and personal matters. "Catherine asked for you this afternoon," Alexander commented as they enjoyed dessert. "She noticed something different about you." Charlotte froze with the spoonful of chocolate mousse halfway to her mouth. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing yet." He smiled reassuringly. "But she's quick-witted, and honestly, I think she'd be an important ally." "Do you want to tell her?" Charlotte asked, feeling a mixture of apprehension and relief. "I want to tell everyone," Alexander replied with conviction. "I want the world to know that I am going to be a father, that you are the extraordinary woman carrying my child, and that I will not let anyone interfere with our happiness." The rest of the night passed like a hazy dream. Alexander took her home, insisting on walking her to the apartment door. In the elevator, Charlotte felt the weight of the day begin to take its toll. "Rest," he murmured, leaning down to kiss her forehead softly. "Tomorrow will be a big day." "Why?" she asked, already feeling sleepy. "Because tomorrow we're going to tell my grandmother," he smiled, his eyes shining with anticipation. "And knowing Catherine Harrison, she's going to want to plan this baby's entire future before she's even discharged." Charlotte should have felt panic at this prospect, but surprisingly, she found comfort in the idea. Maybe, just maybe, she didn't need to do everything alone after all. Soft morning light filtered through the hospital room curtains when Charlotte arrived for her morning round. Catherine Harrison was sitting on her bed, leafing through a business magazine with renewed interest, a sure sign of her progressive recovery. "Good morning, Mrs. Harrison," Charlotte greeted, noticing that Alexander was already present, looking impeccable in his navy blue suit. "Dr. Bennett," Catherine replied, her discerning gaze studying the doctor with an intensity that made Charlotte wonder if the matriarch had yet noticed her condition. "Alexander told me you have something important to share." Charlotte cast a surprised look at Alexander, who approached, positioning himself at her side in a silent gesture of support. She hadn't expected to have this conversation so soon, much less during her morning rounds. "Grandma," Alexander began, his voice soft but firm. "Dr. Bennett, Charlotte, and I met a few months ago in Chicago during a medical conference." Catherine lowered the magazine, her interest visibly piqued. "Continue." Charlotte hesitated, her professionalism fighting against the personal situation she was about to reveal. "We developed an unexpected connection." And now we are expecting a child, Alexander added, his hand finding Charlotte's. The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine watched the two for long moments, her face a mask of neutrality that made Charlotte question whether she had made a mistake in agreeing to this revelation. "Well," Catherine finally spoke, a smile appearing on her lips. "It's about time someone shook up this family's structures a little." Charlotte felt her legs weaken with relief, and Alexander quickly pulled out a chair for her to sit on. "How many months?" Catherine asked, her tone now softer, almost motherly. 6 months, Charlotte replied, unconsciously touching her belly. "It's a boy." "A boy," Catherine repeated, her eyes shining. "Alexander, darling, could you give us a few minutes alone?" Alexander hesitated, looking at Charlotte, who nodded slightly. After he left, Catherine extended her hand to Charlotte. "Come closer, honey," she asked. As Charlotte approached, Catherine held her hand with surprising strength. "You know, when I built this empire alongside my husband, many said that a woman had no place in the business world, that I should be content with just being the wife of a powerful man." Charlotte listened intently, realizing that this conversation was more than just a family introduction. "But I never let other people's expectations define who I was," Catherine continued. "And I see that same strength in you, Dr. Bennett. A respected neurologist, building your own career, making your own choices. I was afraid the family wouldn't accept," Charlotte began. But Catherine interrupted her with a gesture. "The Harrison family needs exactly someone like you," she declared. "Someone who isn't afraid to defy convention when necessary. And Alexander, well, he's never looked at anyone the way he looks at you." The baby chose this moment to move vigorously, making Charlotte smile. "He's already showing the Harrison temper," Catherine commented proudly. "Now, about the wedding." "Mrs. Harrison," Charlotte began tensely. "Catherine, darling, and don't worry, I'm not suggesting an old-fashioned arranged marriage," she smiled. "But I know my grandson. He must already be planning something big." As if summoned by her words, Alexander returned to the room, carrying a small velvet box that made Charlotte's heart skip a beat. "I didn't plan on doing that here," he admitted, moving closer, "but perhaps it would be appropriate to have Grandma's blessing firsthand." "Alexander," Charlotte tried to protest, but he was already kneeling beside her chair. "In Chicago, you showed me that there is more to life than spreadsheets and board meetings," he began, opening the box to reveal a sapphire ring surrounded by diamonds. "You challenged me intellectually, enchanted me with your passion for medicine, and made me want to be a better person. I'm not asking because you're pregnant, but because these last 6 months without you have been the emptiest of my life." Charlotte felt tears forming in her eyes, a reaction she blamed entirely on pregnancy hormones. "Marry me, Charlotte," Alexander urged, his eyes conveying a vulnerability she had only seen once before, that night in Chicago. "Not because tradition requires it, but because I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up every morning next to you, listen to you talk about your medical cases over dinner, and raise our son together." Charlotte looked at Catherine, who was watching the scene with tears in her eyes, and then back at Alexander. All her fear of losing her independence, of being absorbed by the Harrisons' world, seemed small compared to the certainty she saw in his eyes. "Yes," she replied softly, allowing him to slide the ring onto her finger. "But on one condition." "Anything," Alexander promised. "I stand by my professional name and my career," she declared, making Catherine laugh. "My dear," the matriarch commented, "you have just proven why you are exactly what this family needs." The news of Alexander Harrison's engagement to Dr. Charlotte Bennett spread through the hospital like wildfire. As she walked through the halls the next morning, Charlotte could feel the stares and whispers of her colleagues, a mixture of curiosity and speculation that made her instinctively tighten the ring on her finger. "Dr. Bennett!" Head nurse Jessica Matthews intercepted her near the nurses' station. Ms. Harrison's latest test results have just come back. Charlotte mentally thanked him for the professional distraction. He immersed himself in analyzing the data, his mind focused on the numbers and graphs that showed Catherine's positive evolution. The Harrison matriarch was responding exceptionally well to the treatment, her willpower proving as formidable as her reputation suggested. "His levels are excellent," Charlotte commented as she entered Catherine's room, where she found not only her patient, but also an elegant middle-aged woman who she immediately recognized as Victoria Harrison, Alexander's mother. "So this is the woman who finally captured my son," Victoria declared, her blue eyes, identical to Alexander's, studying Charlotte with intensity. "Victoria," Catherine warned softly from the bed. "Charlotte is a brilliant doctor and, most importantly, she makes Alexander happy." Charlotte maintained her professional demeanor, years of medical training serving her well at this point. "Ms. Harrison, I'm Dr. Charlotte Bennett. It's a pleasure to officially meet you." "Mommy," Alexander's voice sounded from the door, his tone carrying a veiled warning. "I didn't expect to find you here so soon." "Naturally, I came as soon as I heard about the engagement," Victoria replied, her expression softening slightly. "And the baby news." The silence that followed was interrupted by the sound of Catherine's heart monitor. Charlotte took the opportunity to focus on her patient, checking vital signs and making notes in her chart. "Your progress is remarkable, Mrs. Harrison," she commented professionally. "If it continues like this, we could consider it high in a few days." "Excellent," Catherine smiled. "That way I can help with the wedding preparations." "Which will need to be soon," Victoria added, her gaze meaningful toward Charlotte's belly. "We can't have the Harrison heir born out of wedlock." "Mommy," Alexander intervened firmly, positioning himself next to Charlotte. "Decisions about our marriage will be made by Charlotte and me." Charlotte felt a rush of gratitude for his support, but before she could respond, her pager rang. "Trauma emergency," she announced, already heading for the door. "Excuse me." For the next few hours, Charlotte immersed herself in work, dealing with a complex head trauma case that required all of her concentration. It was only late in the afternoon, when he finally got a break, that he found Alexander waiting in his office. "I'm sorry for my mother's behavior," he said, offering her a cup of chamomile tea, her favorite since finding out she was pregnant. "She's worried about the family's reputation," Charlotte replied, accepting the drink gratefully. "It's understandable." "No, it's not," Alexander approached, gently massaging her tense shoulders. "Our family needs change, and you, my brilliant neurologist, are exactly what we need." Charlotte relaxed under his touch, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability. "Your traditions are important, Alexander. I don't want to be responsible for causing conflict." "You're not causing conflict." He gently turned her to face him. "It's showing us that there is more than one way to honor traditions. Grandma understands that perfectly." "Catherine is different," Charlotte smiled, remembering the matriarch's immediate support. "Yes, she is. And you know what? She's already planning to turn the east wing of the mansion into a nursery." The idea of the mighty Catherine Harrison choosing wallpaper and baby furniture colors made Charlotte laugh. The happy sound was interrupted by a vigorous movement from the baby. "He's fussy today," she commented, guiding Alexander's hand to feel the movements. "Like your father," a voice said from the door. Victoria Harrison was standing there, watching the scene with a different expression than she had this morning. "Alexander used to kick me nonstop, especially during important meetings." Charlotte noticed a note of nostalgia in Victoria's tone that hadn't been present before. The woman approached hesitantly. "I apologize for my previous behavior," she said, surprising both Charlotte and Alexander. "Catherine made me see that I was repeating the same mistakes my mother-in-law made with me years ago." "What do you mean?" Charlotte asked softly. "When I married Richard, Alexander's father, the family didn't initially approve either. I was a university professor, considered too intellectual by Harrison standards at the time." Victoria smiled wryly. "Catherine was the only one who defended me." Alexander seemed as surprised as Charlotte at this revelation. "You never told me that, Mom." "Because over time, I ended up letting myself be shaped by family expectations," Victoria admitted. "But seeing you two now, I realize that Catherine was right. The Harrisons' strength has always come from our ability to evolve, not from remaining stagnant in outdated traditions." Charlotte felt tears forming in her eyes. Damn pregnancy hormones, as Victoria reached out and gently touched her belly. "My grandson will be lucky to have such a strong and determined mother," she declared softly. "And now, if I may, I need to go plan a baby shower that will be talked about for generations." After Victoria left, Charlotte turned to Alexander, who still seemed to be processing his mother's transformation. "Your family is full of surprises," she commented. "Just like you," he replied, leaning down to kiss her softly. "And I can't wait to discover them all throughout our lives together." The sound of Charlotte's pager interrupted the moment, but this time she didn't care. He had found his place in this complex and surprising family, and he knew that somehow everything would work out. The neurology department at Madison Medical Center was bustling that morning when Charlotte arrived for her daily routine. Her colleagues had organized a small surprise celebration for her engagement, with breakfast and sweets laid out in the doctor's lounge. "I can't believe you hid it from us for so long," exclaimed Dr. Rachel Thompson, her closest colleague in the department, as she admired the engagement ring. "And pregnant, by Alexander Harrison." Charlotte smiled shyly, still adapting to the new reality of being the center of attention. "It all happened very quickly," she explained, grabbing a croissant from the table. "Quick? 6 months pregnant isn't exactly what I'd call quick," Rachel teased with a sly smile. "But seriously, we're all so happy for you. You deserve this." The conversation was interrupted when Dr. Marcus Chen, head of the department, entered the room. "Dr. Bennett, can I speak to you privately?" Charlotte followed Marcus into his office, feeling a pang of apprehension. She knew that her current situation, pregnant and engaged to one of the most influential men in New York, could affect her position at the hospital. "Charlotte," Marcus began, using her first name, something rare for him. "First, congratulations on the engagement and the baby. Second, I want you to know that your position here is secure." "Dr. Chen, Let me finish," he raised his hand. "You're one of the best neurologists to ever work at this hospital. Your treatment protocol for brain trauma is revolutionizing the field. I'm not going to lose a talent like yours just because you're going to become a Harrison." The relief Charlotte felt was immense. "Thank you, Marcus. This means a lot to me." "Now," he continued, a small smile appearing on his lips, "about your maternity leave." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Alexander, looking worried. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but Grandma is having severe headaches." Charlotte immediately went into pro mode. "Excuse me, Dr. Chen." In Catherine's room, Charlotte found the Harrison matriarch with her eyes closed, massaging her temples. Victoria was at his side, holding his hand. "Ms. Harrison," Charlotte began her assessment, performing basic neurological testing. "When did the pain start?" "About an hour ago," Catherine replied, her voice weaker than usual. "And please, darling, I told you to call me Catherine. You are carrying my great-grandson after all." Even in pain, Catherine kept her spirit strong. Charlotte conducted a series of examinations, aware of the anxious gazes of Alexander and Victoria. "I'll order a CT scan just in case," she decided, "but I believe it is a normal reaction to the stress of the last few days." "Stress?" Victoria asked. "Mommy has been getting a lot of rest." "Physically, yes," Charlotte explained, adjusting the IV drip. "But emotionally, there was a lot of news in a short time. A stroke, a great-grandchild on the way, an engagement, and all the wedding planning she insists on overseeing," Alexander added, giving his grandmother a meaningful look. Catherine opened her eyes to give a mischievous smile. "Someone needs to make sure it's a Harrison-worthy event. What you need to ensure is your complete recovery," Charlotte said firmly but tenderly. The wedding can wait. Absolutely not, Catherine declared. I want to see my grandson married before this baby is born. It's my right as a grandmother. Charlotte exchanged a look with Alexander, who shrugged with a resigned smile. Maybe we can do something small and intimate, she suggested. Little? Victoria and Catherine exclaimed in unison, making Alexander laugh. Honey, Victoria said softly, you are marrying the CEO of Harrison Enterprises. Small is not an option. But we can make the process less stressful for everyone, Alexander interjected, noticing Charlotte's discomfort. We will hire the best event organizers and let them take care of the details. Catherine seemed to consider the idea. As long as I can approve the final choices. As long as you follow medical recommendations and get adequate rest, Charlotte conditioned, assuming her professional tone. The moment was interrupted by Dr. Chen, who entered the room with the results of Catherine's CT scan from the previous day. Dr. Bennett, could you take a look at this? He asked, handing her the envelope. Charlotte examined the images carefully, aware of the anxious looks around her. A small smile appeared on his lips. The recovery is progressing better than expected, she announced. If we continue at this pace, we may be considering hospital discharge soon. The relief in the room was palpable. Alexander hugged Charlotte from behind, his hands naturally finding her prominent belly, while Victoria kissed her mother's forehead. See? Catherine smiled. Now we can focus on what really matters. Marriage. Mommy, Victoria warned, but there was amusement in her voice. Charlotte watched the familiar scene with mixed emotions. 6 months ago, when she discovered her pregnancy, she imagined herself raising her child alone, maintaining her independence at all costs. Now, she found herself surrounded by a family that, despite all its traditions and expectations, was proving surprisingly adaptable and welcoming. The baby moved, as if sensing his thoughts, and Alexander lightly squeezed his waist in response. At that moment, Charlotte realized that she wasn't just marrying a man, she was becoming part of something bigger, a family that, with all its complexities and traditions, was willing to grow and change with her. The morning sun illuminated the roof of the Madison Avenue penthouse, where Charlotte was surrounded by decor catalogs and sample wedding invitations. Victoria and Catherine had transformed the apartment into a planning headquarters, with professionals coming and going from the early hours. What do you think of this champagne shade for the tablecloths? Victoria asked, showing off a delicate fabric that certainly cost more than a month's rent on Charlotte's old apartment. It's beautiful, she replied absently, her eyes focused on Catherine's latest medical report that she was discreetly reviewing beneath the color swatches. Charlotte, dear, Catherine called from the sofa where she had been comfortably settled since being released from the hospital. You are more interested in that report than your own wedding flowers. Sorry, Charlotte blushed, closing the folder. It's just that your last exams, they are excellent, as you yourself confirmed yesterday, Catherine added with an understanding smile. Now, can we focus on making you the perfect bride for the wedding taking place in exactly 4 weeks? Charlotte swallowed. 4 weeks seemed like not enough time to organize what was turning out to be Manhattan's social event of the year. Alexander had tried to defuse the situation, but even he had to give in to his grandmother's determination to hold a celebration worthy of the Harrisons. Speaking of the perfect bride, Victoria consulted her iPad. The first dress fitting is scheduled for this afternoon at Kleinfeld. The designer made special changes considering your pregnancy. The baby chose this moment to give a particularly strong kick, as if protesting against all the commotion. Charlotte massaged the side of her belly, an action that didn't go unnoticed by Catherine. He already shows a strong personality, the matriarch commented with pride. Just like my father when I was pregnant. Charlotte's phone vibrated. A message from Alexander. How are you surviving the hurricane of planning? She smiled, quickly typing, Your grandmother and mother are forces of nature. Help? The answer came instantly. Meeting canceled. I'll be there in 30 minutes to rescue you. Ladies, the melodious voice of Madame Dupont, New York's most exclusive event planner, interrupted Charlotte's exchange of messages. "We need to decide on the reception menu. The chef at Le Bernardin has prepared some suggestions." "Actually," Charlotte stood up, feeling a sudden wave of nausea. Apparently the baby wasn't too receptive to the idea of discussing elaborate menus. "I think I need some fresh air." "But darling, we still have to choose the flowers, finalize the guest list and—" Victoria began. "Let her breathe a little," Catherine intervened, sensing Charlotte's discomfort. "Remember, she is pregnant and still maintaining a demanding career." Charlotte cast a grateful glance at her future grandmother-in-law as she made her way to the penthouse balcony. The fresh air of Manhattan helped her clear her mind. Below, the city pulsed in its frenetic rhythm, oblivious to the whirlwind his life had become. "I thought I'd meet you here." Alexander's familiar voice made her smile. He approached her, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his hands on her prominent belly. "How are you two? Your son apparently doesn't approve of discussions about floral arrangements," she teased, leaning back against him. "And your mother and grandmother are determined to make our wedding the event of the century." "We can run away to Vegas," he suggested, kissing her neck softly. "Marry an Elvis celebrant." "Your grandmother would hunt us to the ends of the earth," Charlotte laughed, imagining Catherine's horrified expression at that suggestion. "Probably," he agreed. "But seriously, if this is getting to be too much for you—" "It's not that," she turned to face him. "It's just all this spectacle, this grandeur. It's not me, Alexander. I'm a doctor who spends more time in the operating room than at social events. And that's exactly why I fell in love with you." He touched her face affectionately. "Your dedication, your passion for what you do, you don't have to change who you are because of the last name Harrison. Your family has expectations. My family needs to adapt to the new times," he interrupted gently. "Grandma already understands that. Mom is learning. What about me? Well, I just want you and our son, just the way you are." The moment was interrupted by Victoria, who appeared on the balcony with a tablet in her hands. "Charlotte, dear, we need to decide on the souvenirs." "Oh, Alexander, I'm glad you're here. We have some questions about the ceremony that—" "Mommy," Alexander interrupted her firmly. "Charlotte needs to rest, and I need to take her to lunch before her next prenatal appointment." "But—" Victoria began to protest. "Victoria," Catherine's voice sounded from the room, "leave the lovebirds alone. We have a lot to do here, and they need this time together." Charlotte felt a rush of gratitude for Catherine's understanding. As Alexander guided her out of the apartment, past a small crowd of professionals discussing wedding details, she realized that despite all the chaos, she had found much more than a husband. She had found a family who, even with all their quirks and traditions, was willing to grow and adapt with her. "Where are we going?" she asked as they entered the elevator. "First, that Italian cafe you love in the village," Alexander smiled. "Then we're going to see our little Harrison at the ultrasound. And then, well, then we can run off to Vegas if you want." Charlotte laughed, lacing her fingers through his. "I think I can handle a Harrison wedding, as long as you're by my side." "Always," he promised, sealing the promise with a soft kiss. The waiting room at Dr. Sophia Winter's office was quiet when Charlotte and Alexander arrived for their prenatal appointment. The smell of antiseptic and the soft sound of ambient music created a familiar atmosphere for Charlotte, although this time she was on the other side, as a patient, not a doctor. "Relax," Alexander whispered, noticing how she squeezed his hand. "Everything is fine." "Sorry," Charlotte adjusted herself in her chair uncomfortably. "It's strange being here as a patient. And after all that morning with the wedding preparations—" "Dr. Bennett," the receptionist called. "Dr. Winters is ready to receive you." Sophia Winters was one of Manhattan's most respected obstetricians, known both for her expertise and her discretion with high-profile patients. His practice, located on the Upper East Side, was a reflection of his personality: elegant, professional, and welcoming. Charlotte, Alexander. She greeted the couple with a warm smile. How are you feeling today? Exhausted, Charlotte admitted, laying down on the exam table. Between wedding preparations and working at the hospital, not to mention my grandmother trying to micromanage every aspect of our lives, Alexander added with a fond smile. Oh yeah, I heard about the wedding, Sophia commented as she prepared the ultrasound equipment. Catherine Harrison is a force of nature. I cared for her daughter-in-law, Victoria, during her pregnancy with Alexander. This information took Charlotte by surprise. Were you Alexander's mother's obstetrician? And now I'm taking care of my next Harrison's mother. Sophia smiled, applying the gel to Charlotte's belly. Life has these ironies. The familiar sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the room, making Alexander's eyes light up with excitement. Charlotte watched his face, marveling at how the powerful CEO completely transformed in these moments. The development is excellent, Sophia commented, moving the transducer. He's in a perfect position and… Oh, look at that. What is it? Charlotte asked, her medical instinct immediately on alert. He's smiling, Sophia pointed to the screen. It's relatively rare to capture this moment on an ultrasound. Alexander leaned closer to the screen, delighted. He has your smile, he murmured to Charlotte. And apparently his temper, she joked, remembering how the baby had protested during the marriage discussions earlier. Sophia printed several ultrasound images, including the precious moment of the smile. Now, she said, taking a more serious tone, we need to talk about your stress level, Charlotte. I'm fine, Charlotte started to protest, but Sophia held up a hand. You're a doctor. You know that excessive stress is not good during pregnancy, especially in the third trimester. Alexander immediately became alert. What can we do? First, reduce the workload. Sophia looked meaningfully at Charlotte. I know you love your job, but you need to start thinking about slowing down. What about the wedding preparations? Alexander asked, clearly worried. Delegate, Sophia replied simply. You have a whole team at your disposal. Use them. After the appointment, as they walked through Central Park, Charlotte remained thoughtful, looking at the ultrasound images. What are you thinking about? Alexander asked, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. How everything changed so quickly, she answered honestly. A few months ago, I was just focused on my career, determined to do everything on my own. Now you have a whole family wanting to be part of every moment, he added softly, including a grandmother who was very determined to plan the perfect wedding. And a mother who has probably already picked out her baby's entire layette, Charlotte laughed. Not to mention a father who can't wait to meet this smiling little one. Alexander touched her belly affectionately. They stopped near the lake, watching the ducks swim peacefully. The contrast between the peace of the park and the turmoil of their lives was almost ironic. I'll talk to Dr. Chen, Charlotte finally decided, about reducing my workload. Are you sure? Alexander knew how difficult this decision was for her. Yes, she laid her head on his shoulder. Sophia's right. I need to think about the baby now, and honestly, I'm tired of trying to prove that I can do everything on my own. You never needed to prove anything to anyone. Alexander kissed her forehead. His competence and dedication speak for themselves. Charlotte's cell phone vibrated. A message from Catherine. Dear ones, the florists are here with the final samples. But don't worry, Victoria and I will take care of everything. Just relax and enjoy the day. See? Alexander smiled, reading the message. Even Grandma is learning to give space. Charlotte put away her cell phone, feeling a rush of gratitude for her new family. Despite all the Harrisons' traditions and expectations, they were trying hard to respect their limits and adapt to changes. How about we have lunch at the Gramercy Tavern? Alexander suggested. I know you're craving your pumpkin ravioli. You know me too well, she smiled, allowing herself to be guided out of the park. As they walked, Charlotte realized she had found a balance she never thought possible, between her independence and the support of a family, between her career and her personal life, between who she was and who she was becoming. And surprisingly, this balance didn't mean giving up your essence, but rather expanding your horizons in ways you'd never considered possible. Dr. Marcus Chen's office was quiet when Charlotte walked in that Monday morning. Through the wide windows, the Manhattan skyline was beginning to awaken, with the first rays of sunlight reflecting off the skyscrapers. "Charlotte," Marcus greeted her, indicating the chair in front of her. "How are you feeling?" "Well," she replied, adjusting her lab coat over her increasingly prominent belly. "Actually, that's what I came to talk about." Marcus watched his best neurologist closely. Over the past 6 years, he had watched Charlotte grow from a promising resident to one of the hospital's most sought-after specialists. Now I saw something different in her eyes, a mix of determination and vulnerability that I had never noticed before. "Dr. Winters recommended that I reduce my workload," Charlotte continued, maintaining her signature professional tone. "And after much reflection, I agree that it is the best thing to do." "I was wondering when we would have this conversation." Marcus smiled gently. "I already have a proposal prepared." Charlotte raised her eyebrows in surprise. "He has?" "You can keep your most important cases, including Catherine Harrison, of course," he explained, pulling a folder from his drawer. "But we will redistribute less complex surgeries and routine consultations. We will keep you as the main consultant, supervising cases remotely when necessary." The relief Charlotte felt was immense. Part of her feared that reducing her workload would mean losing the respect she had earned so hard. "There's one more thing," Marcus continued. "The board has approved your proposal for the new Brain Trauma Research Center. They want you to lead the project, at your own pace, of course." "Marcus, I don't know what to say." "Tell her you'll take care of yourself and this baby," he replied with a fatherly smile, "and that she will continue to be the same determined Charlotte who revolutionized our department, just with a better work-life balance." Leaving Marcus's office, Charlotte found Alexander waiting in the hallway. He had insisted on accompanying her to the hospital, worried about her conversation with Marcus. "How was it?" he asked, studying her expression. "Surprisingly well," she smiled, lacing her fingers through his. "Marcus already had a plan in place. I'll keep the main cases and lead the new research center." "This is wonderful." Alexander hugged her, ignoring the curious looks of the employees passing by. "You knew we would find a balance." The moment was interrupted by Alexander's cell phone. It was Victoria, with more questions about the wedding. Charlotte watched with amusement as he tried to patiently explain to his mother that no, they didn't need a full symphony orchestra for the ceremony. "Your mother is impossible," he sighed after hanging up. "She just wants everything to be perfect," Charlotte defended, surprising herself with how close she had become to Victoria in recent weeks. "Speaking of perfection," Alexander smiled mysteriously, "I have a surprise for you. Can we take a break from the hospital?" Charlotte consulted her new reduced schedule. "I have an hour before my next appointment." Alexander guided her to her car, driving through Manhattan until they reached an elegant apartment building on the Upper East Side. In the elevator, he covered her eyes with his hands. "Alexander, what are you up to?" "Trust me," he whispered, guiding her out of the elevator. When he removed his hands, Charlotte found herself in a stunning penthouse overlooking Central Park. Natural light flooded the space through floor-to-ceiling windows, and the decor, while minimalist, was elegant and welcoming. "It's our new home," Alexander announced softly. "If you like it, of course." Charlotte walked through the apartment in silence, taking in every detail. There was a spacious office with empty shelves waiting for her medical books, a master suite with a walk-in closet that would make Victoria proud, and a bedroom that was already partially decorated as a nursery. "Catherine helped with the nursery," Alexander explained, noting her soulful eye for details in soft greens and golds. "She said they were colors neutral enough for a future Harrison, but modern enough to please a progressive doctor." Charlotte laughed through the tears that were beginning to form. "It's perfect," she whispered, turning to hug him. "This is all perfect. There's still one more detail." Alexander guided her to a door she hadn't noticed. When opened, It revealed a small winter garden with a panoramic view of the city. "For when you need a moment of peace," he explained. "I know how much you love plants and how stressful work can be sometimes." Charlotte felt the baby move vigorously, as if she also approved of the new home. "He liked it," she smiled, guiding Alexander's hand to feel the movements. "Welcome to your new home, little Harrison," Alexander murmured, kneeling down to speak directly to Charlotte's belly. "I promise it will be a place full of love, respect, and understanding." Watching Alexander talk to their unborn son, Charlotte realized she had found much more than a work-life balance. She had found a true partner, someone who understood and supported her dreams as they built a new chapter of their lives together. The organized chaos of a Wednesday morning took over Madison Medical Center when Charlotte received the news that would change her plans for the day. Catherine Harrison had fainted during her breakfast. Blood pressure 140/90, Nurse Jessica reported as Charlotte examined her patient. She regained consciousness quickly, but I refuse to be admitted again, Catherine added firmly from the examination bed, while Victoria and Alexander exchanged worried glances at her side. Charlotte maintained her professionalism, even though her heart was beating fast. "Catherine, we need to do some tests to understand what caused this episode." "What caused it was all this stress about the wedding," Victoria interjected, her voice betraying concern. "Mommy has spent hours going over every detail." "Because I want it to be perfect," Catherine protested, but her voice sounded weaker than usual. Alexander approached his grandmother, holding her hand. "Grandma, the wedding can wait. Your health is more important." Charlotte observed the family interaction as she reviewed the preliminary results. The baby moved, as if sensing her tension, and she unconsciously adjusted the lab coat over her 7-month-old belly. "Let's do an MRI," she decided, her tone leaving no room for argument. "And you will be under observation for at least 24 hours. "But the suppliers," Catherine began. "You can wait," Victoria added firmly, surprising everyone with her assertiveness. "In fact, I think we all need to take a step back and reevaluate our priorities." The silence that followed was interrupted by Dr. Marcus Chen, who entered the room with the results of the initial exams. After a brief conference with Charlotte, he agreed to the treatment plan. "Catherine," Charlotte sat next to her patient and future grandmother, "I know you want everything to be perfect, but you need to understand that your recovery is still ongoing. The stroke you suffered was not trivial." Catherine watched the young doctor for a moment, her eyes revealing deep understanding. "You know, when I built the Harrison empire, a lot of people said I was trying too hard, that I should slow down. I never listened to them. And look where that got you," Alexander commented softly. "You've built something extraordinary, Grandma. Now it's time to trust that we can continue your legacy while you recover properly." Charlotte felt the baby move again, and this time Catherine noticed its subtle movement. "Come here, darling," she asked, reaching out to touch Charlotte's belly. "This little one is the real priority right now, not an elaborate wedding or old-fashioned traditions." Victoria discreetly wiped away a tear. "Mom is right. Charlotte, Alexander, why don't we do something more intimate? Something that reflects who you really are?" "But society," Catherine began, but then stopped, smiling wryly. "Listen to me, still bound by the same conventions I've spent my life defying." Dr. Chen returned with a wheelchair to transport Catherine to the MRI. As the nurses helped her, Charlotte felt Alexander squeeze her hand gently. "Go take care of Grandma," he whispered. "Mom and I are going to rethink all our wedding plans." Over the next few hours, as she supervised Catherine's scans and analyzed results, Charlotte reflected on how her life had changed. A few months ago, she was determined to maintain her independence at any cost. Now, he found himself part of a family that, despite all its traditions and expectations, was willing to adapt and grow. "Her scans are stable," she informed Catherine later, in the room where the matriarch had been set up for observation. "But I want you to rest completely for the next few days." "Only if you promise one thing," Catherine negotiated, her indomitable spirit shining through the weariness. Promise that you won't let our traditions stifle who you are. This family needs your strength, your independence, your modern vision. Charlotte sat on the edge of the bed, emotional. Catherine. No, let me finish, the matriarch insisted. I spent so much time worrying about keeping up appearances that I almost forgot what really matters. This baby, she touched Charlotte's belly again, represents the Harrison future. A future that needs to balance tradition with progress, strength with compassion. Victoria, who had returned with Alexander, approached the bed. Mom is right. Charlotte, honey, let's redesign everything. Something that represents who you are, not what society expects. A wedding in the conservatory of our new house, Alexander suggested, his eyes twinkling. Intimate, personal, with only the people who really matter. Charlotte felt tears forming in her eyes. Damn pregnancy hormones. Are you sure? The Harrison traditions? The Harrison traditions have always been about family, strength, and adaptation, Catherine stated firmly. And you, my dear, are the perfect embodiment of these values. The baby kicked vigorously, as if agreeing, making everyone laugh. In that moment, looking at her new united family, Charlotte realized that she had found much more than a career-life balance. She had found a place where she could truly be herself, where tradition and progress could coexist in harmony. Dawn found Charlotte awake in her new penthouse, watching the city awaken through the conservatory windows. After the scare with Catherine the day before, she hadn't been able to sleep well, her medical instinct mixing with family concern. Couldn't sleep? Alexander's sleepy voice sounded from behind her. He came over, still wearing his silk pajamas, and wrapped her in his arms. I kept thinking about Catherine, Charlotte admitted, leaning back against him, and how everything changed so quickly. The redesigned wedding, the change in plans. For the better, he added, kissing her neck softly. An intimate wedding here, in this garden, with only the people who really matter. It's more us. Charlotte's phone vibrated, a message from the hospital that Catherine's latest scans were normal. She let out a sigh of relief she didn't know she was holding. Good news? Alexander asked, noticing her more relaxed expression. Your grandmother's tests are stable, she confirmed, turning to face him. But I still want to keep her under observation for another day. The sound of the doorbell interrupted their conversation. It was Victoria, carrying several folders and her inseparable tablet. Good morning, darlings, she greeted, her usual energy slightly subdued. I brought some ideas for the new wedding concept. More intimate, more personal, like we talked about yesterday. Charlotte and Alexander exchanged amused glances as they followed Victoria into the living room. The baby stirred, as if he too was curious about the new plans. I thought I'd turn this winter garden into something magical, Victoria began, spreading out reference photos on the coffee table. Delicate lights, natural flowers, maybe some orchids. I know they're your favorite, Charlotte. It's perfect, Charlotte smiled, surprising herself with how the idea of a smaller, more personal wedding made her feel calmer. And for the menu, Victoria continued, instead of a formal banquet, we can have interactive gourmet stations. More casual, more welcoming. Mommy, Alexander interrupted gently. Are you really okay with this? A smaller wedding? Victoria paused for a moment, her blue eyes, so similar to her son's, softening. You know, yesterday, seeing your grandmother in that hospital bed, I realized something important. All these traditions, these expectations, they only matter if they serve to bring the family together, not create unnecessary pressure. Charlotte felt tears forming in her eyes. These pregnancy hormones were really making her more emotional. Victoria, No, let me finish. Victoria took his hands. You brought something special to our family, Charlotte. Not just a grandson, but a new perspective. And seeing how you balance your brilliant career with your personal life, how you maintain your identity even as you become part of the Harrisons, well, it made me rethink a lot of things. Alexander's phone rang. It was Catherine, asking to make a video call. When her face appeared on the screen, she looked more rested, even in the hospital setting. "So, how are the preparations going?" she asked, her genuine interest evident even through the digital screen. "Mom is surprising us," Alexander replied, turning the phone around to show the ideas spread across the table. "Victoria has always had excellent taste," Catherine commented proudly. "I just needed to free myself a little from social conventions." "Speaking of breaking free from convention," Charlotte interjected, her medical tone coming naturally. "How are you feeling?" "Better, doctor," Catherine smiled. "And looking forward to getting out of here and helping with the final preparations." "One day at a time," Charlotte warned gently. "Your health is our priority now." The morning passed at a leisurely pace, with Victoria presenting her renewed ideas for the wedding, while Charlotte occasionally checked in for updates on Catherine's condition. The contrast between the chaos of the last few days and the peace of that morning was almost tangible. "Charlotte." Alexander caught her eye as Victoria went into the kitchen to make more tea. "Are you really happy with these changes?" She considered the question for a moment, one hand resting on her belly where the baby moved gently. "You know, when I found out I was pregnant, I was so afraid of losing my identity, of being absorbed into the Harrison world." "What now?" he asked softly. "Now I realize I don't have to choose between who I am and who I'm becoming." She smiled. "Your family, our family, is willing to grow and change with me. This smaller, more personal wedding is a reflection of that." Alexander pulled her closer, his hands naturally finding the place where his son grew. "You changed us, Charlotte, for the better." Victoria returned with tea, finding the couple hugging each other near the window. Her smile was one of pure maternal satisfaction. "You know," she commented, placing the tray on the table, "I think I finally understand what Mom always said about traditions." "What would it be?" Charlotte asked curiously. "That the best traditions are those that can adapt without losing their essence," Victoria replied, her eyes shining with newfound wisdom, "like our family is doing now." News of the Harrison wedding's downsizing spread quickly through Manhattan social circles, generating a mixture of surprise and speculation. Charlotte watched digital tabloid headlines on her tablet during a break at the hospital, grateful for the decision to make the ceremony more intimate. Ignoring the press comments, Catherine's voice surprised her. The Harrison matriarch sat in her hospital bed, looking stronger after 2 days of enforced rest. "Trying," Charlotte admitted, turning off the tablet. "Some seem particularly interested in theorizing about why the wedding of the year has been reduced to an intimate celebration." "Let them talk," Catherine dismissed with an elegant gesture. "The Harrisons have always been something to talk about, ever since I built this empire alongside my Charles." Charlotte adjusted her lab coat over her 7-month-old belly while making the necessary notes in the chart. "Your exams continue to improve. If we maintain this progress, I will be able to discharge you tomorrow." "Just in time for the final preparations?" Catherine smiled, her eyes shining with the familiar Harrison determination. "Victoria showed me the plans for the conservatory. It will be perfect." The sound of heels in the hallway announced the arrival of Victoria, who entered the room carrying several fabric samples. "Charlotte, dear, I need your opinion on these textures for the lounge cushions." "Mommy." Alexander came up close behind, looking slightly exasperated. "We agreed to keep everything simple, remember?" "And we are," Victoria protested, spreading the tissues over the hospital bed. "But simple does not mean devoid of elegance." Charlotte felt the baby move vigorously, as if it also wanted to participate in the discussion. Catherine noticed his expression and held out her hand. "Come here, darling," she called. When Charlotte approached, Catherine touched her belly affectionately. "This little one already shows the Harrison spirit, always wanting to make his presence known." "Speaking of presence," Victoria interrupted softly. "Charlotte, there is something I would like to discuss with you." The serious tone in his voice made everyone pay attention. Victoria took out a small velvet box from her Hermes bag. "This necklace belonged to my grandmother," she explained, opening the box to reveal a delicate sapphire and diamond necklace. "She wore it to her wedding, I wore it to mine, and now, well, we'd like you to wear it." Charlotte felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Victoria, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Catherine interjected softly. "Some traditions deserve to be maintained, especially those that unite generations." Alexander watched the scene with his eyes shining with emotion, his hand naturally finding Charlotte's. "It's perfect," he murmured. The moment was interrupted by the beeping of Charlotte's pager. An emergency in the emergency room required her presence. "Go," Catherine ordered before Charlotte could apologize. "We take care of the details here." In the hallway, before Charlotte could head to the emergency room, Alexander gently pulled her into a hug. "Are you okay? Aren't you feeling overwhelmed by all this?" "Strangely enough, no," she smiled, adjusting her lab coat. "I think I've finally found my balance, between being a doctor, a future mother, and a Harrison." "You will always be yourself first," he assured, kissing your forehead. "That's why I fell in love with you." The rest of the day passed in a blur of appointments and procedures, but Charlotte found herself occasionally touching the spot where Victoria's necklace would rest on her neck during the ceremony. It was strange how an object could carry so much meaning, so much history. At the end of his shift, he found Alexander waiting in his office with a mysterious expression. "I have a surprise for you," he announced. "More surprises?" She raised an eyebrow, amused. "Haven't we had enough for today?" "This is different," he assured, guiding her to the elevator. "Remember how you mentioned that you missed having a space of your own for research?" Charlotte nodded, curious. Alexander led her to an area of the hospital that had been under renovation in recent weeks. When she opened the double doors, Charlotte was speechless. It was a fully equipped research laboratory, with cutting-edge technology and a panoramic view of the city. A sign on the wall read, "Dr. Charlotte Bennett Brain Trauma Research Center." "Alexander," she began, but the words trailed off. "Before you protest," he smiled, "this isn't a wedding gift from the Harrisons. It's the hospital's investment in the future of neurology. Marcus Chen helped plan it all." Charlotte walked through the space, touching the equipment reverently. "It was exactly as I had dreamed, right down to the arrangement of the workstations." "How did you know?" she asked, turning to face him. "Because I pay attention when you talk about your dreams," he replied simply. "And because I believe you can change the world of medicine, just as you are changing the Harrisons." The baby kicked vigorously, as if approving of his mother's new workspace. Charlotte laughed, guiding Alexander's hand to feel the movements. "I think we have another scientist in the family," she joked. "Or just someone who, like your parents, isn't afraid to dream big," he replied, pulling her into a soft kiss. At that moment, surrounded by state-of-the-art medical equipment and in the arms of the man who supported her dreams unconditionally, Charlotte knew that she had found much more than a balance. She had found her place in the world, without needing to give up who she was or what she dreamed of being. The last ray of afternoon sunlight illuminated the winter garden as employees from the decoration company finalized the preparations for the wedding that would take place the following day. Charlotte watched the movements through the window of her new closet, where Victoria and Catherine were overseeing the final adjustments to her wedding dress. "Perfect," Catherine declared, her eyes shining with excitement as she delicately adjusted the lace at the neckline. The dress, a unique creation that combined classic elegance with modern touches, had been specially designed to accommodate her nearly 8-month pregnancy. "Something's missing," Victoria murmured, circling Charlotte with a critical eye before opening a navy velvet box. The family's sapphire and diamond necklace sparkled in the soft light of the room. "Now, yes." Charlotte felt a lump in her throat as Victoria fastened the necklace around her neck. The weight of the jewel carried not only history, but also acceptance, your official entry into the Harrison family. "Dr. Bennett?" Jessica, his head nurse, appeared in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt, but we have an emergency at the hospital. It's about the Peterson case. The patient with complex brain trauma? Charlotte immediately went into professional mode, even dressed as a bride. Yes, Dr. Chen has requested your urgent consultation. Victoria started to protest, but Catherine raised her hand, silencing her. Go, darling. Some traditions can wait, lives cannot. With careful help, Charlotte changed from her wedding dress to her familiar lab coat. The contrast between the two worlds, the dedicated doctor and the bride about to get married, could not be more evident. At the hospital, Dr. Chen was waiting for her with the latest images from the Peterson case. For 2 hours, they discussed treatment strategies, with Charlotte offering insights based on her latest research. You really can't turn off doctor mode, can you? Alexander commented with a smile when he found her leaving the conference room. He had been alerted by Victoria about the emergency. Just like you can't turn off CEO mode, she teased, noting his impeccable suit even at that time of night. Last-minute meeting? Actually, I came to pick up my workaholic fiancé. He walked over, kissing her forehead softly. And make sure she gets adequate rest before the big day. Back at the apartment, they found Catherine and Victoria still overseeing the last details of the decoration. The winter garden had been transformed into a modern fairy tale setting, with delicate lights woven through the iron and glass beams and white orchids strategically placed. Tomorrow, Victoria announced with finality, no hospitals, emergencies, or business meetings. Just family. Speaking of family, Catherine added, Richard is here from London. Charlotte felt Alexander tense slightly beside her. The relationship with his father, the absent Harrison patriarch, has always been complex. He wants to have dinner with you tonight, Victoria continued softly, to get to know Charlotte properly. The silence that followed was filled with tension. Richard Harrison had been notably absent throughout the wedding planning process, his only contributions being formal emails through his secretary. We don't need to, Charlotte began, but Alexander gently interrupted her. No, it's time, he declared, his voice firm. Time to show my father that the Harrisons can evolve without losing their essence. Dinner was scheduled for the private restaurant at the Pierre Hotel, an establishment that was practically part of the Harrisons' history. Richard Harrison was exactly as Charlotte imagined, tall, imposing, with the same penetrating eyes as Alexander, but without the warmth that characterized his son. So, Richard began after the main courses were served, I hear you've scaled back the ceremony significantly. Yes, Alexander replied, his hand finding Charlotte's under the table. We decided to focus on what really matters. And what would that be? Richard asked, his neutral tone masking any emotion. Family, Charlotte replied before Alexander could, her voice soft but firm. True connection, not just appearances. Richard studied her for a long moment, his eyes lingering briefly on her prominent belly before returning to her face. Victoria tells me you're leading revolutionary research into brain trauma. Yes, sir, Charlotte confirmed, slightly surprised by the change of subject. And who refused to abandon her career, even though she became a Harrison? Charlotte's career is part of who she is. Alexander interjected, pride evident in his voice. Just as Grandma's determination to build the Harrison empire alongside Grandpa Charles was part of her. Something changed in Richard's expression, a flash of recognition, perhaps even regret. You know, he began, his tone softer. When I met Victoria, she was a brilliant college professor. She had so many dreams, so many plans, and abandoned them to conform to family expectations, Alexander added, a note of bitterness in his voice. Yes, Richard admitted, surprising everyone. It was a mistake that should not be repeated. Charlotte felt the baby move vigorously, as if responding to the tension in the room. Instinctively, he reached for his stomach. Can I? Richard asked hesitantly, gesturing towards his belly. When Charlotte nodded, he reached out, gently touching the spot where his grandson moved. A genuine smile, the first of the night, lit up his face. He's got Harrison energy. Richard commented softly. And mother's determination, Alexander added, his tone carrying a mix of pride and defiance. The rest of the dinner passed in a lighter mood, with Richard surprisingly interested in the details of Charlotte's research and plans for the Brain Trauma Center. When they said goodbye, Richard held Charlotte's hand for a moment longer than necessary. "Welcome to the family, Dr. Bennett Harrison," he said simply, but his words carried a weight of acceptance that Charlotte hadn't expected. The dawn of the wedding day brought a different energy to the Upper East Side penthouse. Charlotte woke up in her old guest bedroom. Victoria had insisted on the tradition of bride and groom not seeing each other before the ceremony, to the soft sound of movement around the apartment. "Good morning, future Mrs. Harrison." Jessica, her head nurse and now close friend, entered carrying a breakfast tray. "Or should I say, Dr. Bennett Harrison?" Charlotte smiled, adjusting herself against the pillows as the baby made his first appearance of the day. "I'm still deciding on that," she admitted, gratefully accepting the cup of chamomile tea. The morning passed in an organized whirlwind of preparations. Victoria coordinated a team of professionals with the same efficiency that Charlotte demonstrated in the operating room, while Catherine supervised everything from her strategically positioned armchair, still following medical recommendations for moderate rest. "Something's missing," Victoria murmured, watching Charlotte as the makeup artist applied the finishing touches. The wedding dress, with its elegant cut that highlighted her advanced pregnancy, was already in place, as was the historic sapphire necklace. "This," Catherine announced, removing a small velvet box from her purse. Inside, a pair of sapphire and diamond earrings perfectly complemented the necklace. "They were my mother's. I thought it was time to pass them on." Charlotte felt tears forming, threatening to ruin her newly applied makeup. "Catherine, No crying," Victoria interjected quickly, even though her own eyes were teary. "Makeup needs to last until the photos." A gentle movement in Charlotte's belly made her smile. "Your grandson seems anxious," she commented to Catherine. "Naturally," the matriarch replied with a knowing smile. "He knows he's about to witness a historic moment for the Harrisons." On the other side of the apartment, Alexander was getting ready with the help of his father, Richard. The presence of the Harrison patriarch, normally so distant, carried significant weight on this day. "Your grandfather wore this cufflink to his wedding to your grandmother," Richard commented, helping Alexander with the final details of the outfit. "It was the day he really understood that the Harrisons needed to evolve." "What do you mean?" Alexander asked, surprised by his father's unusual openness. "His grandmother was considered too revolutionary for her time," Richard explained, adjusting his son's tie. "Many said she would ruin the family name with her modern ideas about women in business. Her grandfather was criticized for supporting her." "How you were criticized for marrying Mom, a college professor," Alexander finished softly. "Yes," Richard admitted, "and I made the mistake of trying to mold her to other people's expectations, something your grandfather never did with Catherine." The moment of vulnerability between father and son was interrupted by a knock on the door. It was time for the ceremony. The conservatory had been transformed into a contemporary fairy tale setting. The natural light filtered through the glass created an ethereal effect on the white orchids and silk ribbons that decorated the space. The few guests, just close family and close friends, created a welcoming and meaningful atmosphere. When Charlotte entered, led by Marcus Chen, a choice that symbolized the merging of her professional and personal lives, time seemed to pause. Alexander, waiting at the improvised altar, felt his heart skip a beat when he saw her. The ceremony was conducted with an elegant simplicity that perfectly reflected the couple. The vows, written by themselves, captured the essence of their union. "Charlotte," Alexander began, his voice thick with emotion, "you came into my life like a force of nature, defying every certainty I had about tradition and expectations. You showed me that true love is not about molding someone to our expectations, but about growing together, respecting who we are." "Alexander," Charlotte replied, her hands clasped in his, You showed me that I don't have to choose between who I am and who I can become. That family is not about giving up on yourself, but about finding strength in supporting each other." Catherine watched the scene with tears in her eyes, her hand firmly held by Victoria. Richard, sitting next to them, maintained a serene expression that hid his own emotion. After exchanging rings and the kiss that sealed the union, the small group gathered for an intimate celebration. There was no traditional waltz or bouquet toss, just family and friends sharing stories and meaningful moments. "To the new Harrisons," Catherine proposed a toast, her voice strong despite recent events. "May they continue to remind us that tradition without evolution is stagnation. For the future," Richard added surprisingly, his gaze meeting Victoria's with a silent plea for forgiveness for years of imposed expectations. Charlotte and Alexander shared a knowing look as their guests celebrated. At that moment, surrounded by people who truly mattered, they realized they had created something unique, a perfect fusion between tradition and progress, between independence and family unity. The baby moved vigorously, as if wanting to join in the celebration, making Charlotte giggle softly. "I think he approves," she murmured to Alexander. "Of course you approve," he replied, his hand naturally finding the place where his son grew. "He is a Harrison Bennett, after all, the best of both worlds." And so, in the soft evening light that filtered through the conservatory, a new Harrison era began, an era that promised to honor the past while boldly embracing the future.